Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema and sci-fi, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am once again robcasting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is episode 643 of Robservations, the show about something. We're getting ever closer to our 666th episode, and boy, I just love hearing from everybody about what songs about Satan should make our satanic playlist for episode 666. A lot of people are sending in things. I would also throw out, what are your favorite movies and TV shows about the devil himself? We should probably have like a watch party or a watch list or something. But that comes later. What comes now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies. Boy, today was an interesting day, wasn't it? I don't know. For me, it was. Are you keeping up? There's this thing coming out this week. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's kind of a remake of a film that was released in 2017. It's a reimagining, and it happens to be a superhero movie, and it's called Zack Snyder's Justice League. You might have heard of it. Some of you might not. But anyway, I don't have to explain it, I don't think, not to this audience. That aside, all jesting aside, what I found very interesting is the reception. All of the major trade magazines, all the websites, everybody's weighed in on it. I have not, because I haven't seen it. I will be here at 3 a.m. Thursday morning. That will be 3 a.m. Pacific time. Thursday morning, I will have watched Justice League. I'm going to get on live right away. It'll be 3 a.m. my time. I know, right? I'll just stay up, day drink, whatever. But 3 a.m. my time, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. I've not seen Justice League, but of course, it's not like the movie's going to be spoiled, because it's not a complete ground-up reimagining of the Justice League concept. It's just we're getting the original intent of the director and Zack Snyder, as we all know. But I think what's been really interesting for me, and yes, I have been reading all the different reviews, and I'm not so much going to get into spoilers here. I'm going to read some of these reviews, but what I have found interesting is it's been very, to me, divisive. The responses, as I thought they would be. I could have predicted this from 1,000 yards away. And, any of you who are imagination connoisseurs, and I'm a lifetime imagination connoisseur, and one of the things that I've noticed as I've gone through life is there are people who are imagination connoisseurs, and lo and behold, there are people who are not. And there has constantly been this, I guess you'd call it, what would you call it? I guess, people who just don't like certain things as opposed to people who do like certain things. Like, I've never not liked science fiction, fantasy, and horror. But my mother is a total pragmatist. Now, she's not against those things, but she doesn't necessarily actively seek them out. But, however, what's interesting is my mother has been, she's been watching General Hospital, the soap opera General Hospital, for over 50 years. Now, she loves General Hospital. She's been there through The Marriage of Luke and Laura and Sean Donnelly and The Treasure and Robert Scorpio and Anna Devane. That was my period of General Hospital that I watched in the 80s. But she does watch that. And I would say that I think that makes my mom an imagination connoisseur, because she is consuming stories. And those stories have a lot of, they're not exactly the most realistic stories in the world, but they're grounded in the real world. Maybe they've delved into the supernatural here and again, but they're mostly part of the real world. My mom sort of tunes out when something happens in space, or if there's a monster on the loose. It's something that in her mind, it's not something that she gravitates toward, nor do I think she necessarily finds value in it. Whereas I think we can all understand that as imagination connoisseurs, when you're seeing a story about a werewolf or a space monster, or you're watching a space opera, such as, maybe if you're going to watch Event Horizon, which is coming out later this month from Scream Factory, a new version, and a spaceship, the Event Horizon, winds up in a singularity or someplace, the engine turns on and takes it through the dimension that might very well be hell itself. Well, that's something you can be like, oh, okay, two great tastes that taste great together. It's Hellraiser meets Alien, whatever. And that like turns you on. It's not something where you're going to go like, I don't believe that. That could never happen. That could never happen. Whereas my mother, as I famously told on this show many times, when she saw Raiders of the Lost Ark and we were driving home together, it was just her and I said, Mom, what'd you think of Raiders of the Lost Ark? And she's like, well, that could never happen. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And my mom's like, when he's hanging off the back of the truck trying to get the ark, trying to get on that truck that has the ark, he's being dragged behind that truck, and the gravel and the dirt is just in his face. He could never hang on. I said, well, Mom, what about the power of God coming out of the Ark of the Covenant at the end and vanquishing the Nazis? My mom's like, oh, no, that could happen. But my mom had a real problem with him hanging on behind the truck with his bullwhip. So it was not surprising to me to see a very varied reaction to the Snyder Cut. And one of the things that I think is interesting about the reception of a movie like Zack Snyder's Justice League is I think it really comes down to how far or what you enjoy as far as your imagination connoisseurship of things. And even Zack Snyder himself said of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in one of the interviews I covered this past weekend, even he said the Marvel Cinematic Universe is it's action comedy. And that's what it is. And they do it, he said Marvel does it very well. And in a way, the Marvel Cinematic Universe starts like the Marvel heroes themselves. It's the everyman. Steve Rogers was a beanpole who grew up and kind of victimized, and then he took super serum and became Captain America. Or Spider-Man, nerdy kid Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider, he becomes Spider-Man. The Hulk, scientist, blasted with gamma radiation, becomes the Hulk. So it's the every person who becomes extraordinary. Whereas the DC universe, when you're dealing with Superman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman, you're basically dealing with godlike entities that are not really human beings to begin with. They're extraordinary. Aquaman's an Atlantean, Wonder Woman's an Amazonian, Superman's a Kryptonian. Yeah, and sure, Batman is an everyman. But he has pulled himself up to the level. I mean, he's not super powered, but he's developed his intellect and his sleuthing abilities beyond that of mortal men. But he for the most part, the DC universe is much more mythic in nature. Much more like literally gods of Olympus. And a lot of the reviews that have come out are about that. And there's a lot of people that don't dig that, and then there's people that do. But I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I like very much, because I grew up reading Marvel comics, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think, is a terrific reflection of what it was like to read Marvel comics. Like it's watching my childhood dreams made flesh. But as an adult, I can still appreciate it because the characterizations are great. It's really well cast, and you still feel like it's normal people that have been transformed into these extraordinary beings that are taking on these extraordinary circumstances. But I think it's very relatable to people, and the reason it is so accessible is Scott Lang was a dude coming out of prison that wants to reconnect with his family, and he discovers the Ant-Man suit, and he becomes Ant-Man and Giant Man and whatever else. And we even see the way he reacts to meeting Captain America is the way we would react to meeting Captain America. But with DC, it's the other end of the spectrum. But there's a lot of people who don't take that mythic status of the DC universe seriously. And I think the people that also didn't take it that seriously or didn't understand it was the studio executives at Warner Brothers who everyone's like, well, why can't DC be more like Marvel? And I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what people expect from DC movies. And I think there's a reason why Aquaman grossed $1 billion. Aquaman embraced the mythic fantasy side of its mythology. And when I watched Aquaman, I couldn't believe the last battle. There was, other than Aquaman, and there was no human beings. I mean, yes, there were humanoid creatures, but they were all from under the sea, the Seven Kingdoms or whatever. I mean, Jaimin Hansu's Fishman, and we're watching dudes and women are they're on the backs of giant seahorses and sharks that are armored and battling in the. I mean, this is full on, full blown fantasy. My mom, I don't think would dig it. I mean, she can deal with the power of God coming out of the Ark of the Covenant because, it's biblical or whatever. But I don't think my mom would have dug Aquaman. She would have been like, what are we watching? Although she might have. She did like Avatar. But I think that what's really interesting to me with the response to Zack Snyder's Justice League, at least the critical response, the official critical response, is that demarcation in terms of, like, when I watch those shots. I'll give you an example. Aquaman, the great shot of the slow motion water crashing in on him. That is a mythic image. It's like something Alex Ross might have drawn in the comics. But when you're looking at that, people who dig that stuff, like when I say that it's metal, man, like that's what I mean. I'm looking at an image that is evocative of myth to me. And when I see Aquaman standing there and the waves crash down on him, that's not a normal guy. That's an Atlantean. And for me, it fires my imagination. I want to be the dude that looks like Jason Momoa with that body and that can stand against the tidal forces, because he's an Atlantean. And watching that in slow motion, I could watch 10 minutes of that shit. I could watch Jason Momoa standing getting pounded by the surf for a long time. And I would be into it. I'm like, yes. I mean, that's evocative to me because the imagery alone makes it all worthwhile. Now, there's other people that aren't that kind of person. It doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make me better than them or them better than me. There's just some people that be like, I get it. So water's crashing on them. And they don't see the myth in it. And one of the things that I felt about Zack Snyder's Man of Steel and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is they are the opposite of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing. They're all about myth. They're all about Mount Olympus and being on the top of Mount Olympus with the gods. I mean, they really are. And I'm there for that. Like, I really like that. That's what I'm looking for. It's very different. Sure, you've got superheroes, but, I like stories about lawyers. You could watch Boston Legal, or you could watch L.A. Law, or you could watch a movie like Paul Newman in one of my most beloved films, The Verdict. Still things about lawyers, but very different. Boston Legal had the comedic bent, L.A. Law was a little bit more serious, and a movie like The Verdict is about a man fighting for his soul. To me, The Verdict is a mythic film, whereas you could watch another movie, say, And Justice for All with Al Pacino, not nearly as mythic, it's more of a satire. But still movies about lawyers. And I think what's interesting is that longtime comic readers and longtime imagination connoisseurs understand the difference between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what DC was doing. And Zack Snyder was trying to work in that mythic realm. And what happened was the studio decided that mythic realm might have been the wrong direction that they wanted to go in. They wanted to have the MCU. They wanted their money, certainly, the critical and populist success, and of course mostly money. But they were employing a director in Zack Snyder who was giving them something different. Now, I would say the only mistake that was really made on Zack's part is perhaps, and you're not going to say no, so I understand, the budgets he was working within. If he had made Man of Steel for $150 million instead of $225 million, I think there would have been less of a problem. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice cost a lot of money. And I think that was the big problem, is that they want to have those bigger margins, and the movies they're trying to make are expensive. It's expensive when you're trying to create mythical figures, and there's that much effects work that needs to be done. But so now we have these narratives. We've got the whole Snyder Cut movement, and we have Zack Snyder being deposed as the director, and obviously Joss Whedon coming on. And that's one story. That's one narrative. That's also kind of a mythic story. The reemergence of Zack Snyder and the entirety of the fan push to get the Snyder Cut made, sticking with it, the whole movement, and then it getting made, and HBO Max, Warner Brothers being purchased by AT&T, and a whole new regime that has no qualms about letting Zack finish his. They don't have any egg on their face if it happens. So now we're in a world where the movies finally come out, and I wondered, I'm like, I'll bet the reviews of this are going to be completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. People are going to have big reactions to it. And certainly that has been the case. And if you look at Hollywood Reporter and Variety, two of the industry trade papers of record, diametrically opposed reviews of the Snyder Cut. Let me read you some of the from the Variety review. Read some of it. The headline is Zack Snyder's Justice League review. The director's 4-hour cut is truly a new film and a knockout. Now, this is by Owen Gleiberman. Owen Gleiberman I generally like, and he has an affinity for science fiction, fantasy, horror, and kind of understands it. Now, he starts out and says something really interesting in this review. It takes an extraordinary, diverse skill set to direct a great comic book movie. You've got to be a visual effects wizard, a maestro of story and pace, a popcorn humanist who can find the relatable dimension of a bunch of freaks in capes and breastplates and spandex, and enough of an artist to tie the whole thing together into an indelible big vision. It's no wonder that in the years since Hollywood got eaten alive by comic book culture, the superhero movies that have achieved a genuine sweeping transcendence can be counted on one hand. The Dark Knight, Spider-Man 2, Black Panther, a few others. To that hallowed list, I would now add Zack Snyder's Justice League, the thrillingly restored 4-hour-long director's version of the 2017 DC Comics extravaganza. The new movie, and make no mistake, it really is a new movie, is more than a vindication of Snyder's original vision. It's a grand, nimble, and immersive entertainment. A team of heroes' origin story that, at heart, is classically conventional, yet now it's told with such an intoxicating, childlike sincerity and ominous fairy tale wonder that it takes you back to what comic books at their best have always sought to do. Make you feel like you're seeing gods at play on Earth. And then it goes on, and he talks about the history of the Snyder Cut and all that. And then he goes on and says that timing, they say, is everything. And there are two ways that the new Justice League turns out to be karmically well-timed. It's premiering a year into the pandemic, which means that audiences have now gone for 12 months without experiencing the primal joys of high-flying fantasy escapism on the big screen. We're starved for it. And though it's true that Justice League will be seen by and large on HBO Max, the film is such a feast of bravura eye candy and emotionally serious spectacle that it seems to be delivering all the excitement we've been missing. As someone who has never been shy about dissing the global obsession with comic book cinema, I found that the film totally tapped my inner fanboy. The 4 hours of it glide by in an addictive trance. But the other way the experience of Justice League is shaped by timing is that now that Snyder has restored the film to its pop operatic grandeur, it strikingly echoes the sinister extravagance of the Avengers saga, notably the last two installments of it, which hadn't come out when the bouldered-eyes, trimmed-to-the-bone Justice League appeared in 2017. Justice League accomplishes in 4 hours what those films did in 9. It unites a team of superheroes, but never forgets that each of them is seriously worthy of his or her own story. It pits them against a humongous slab of rock-jawed evil, in this case the molten Darkseid, who got trimmed out of the 2017 version, and his loyal demon henchman Steppenwolf, who seeks to control all life in the universe. And it's finally a startling tale of death and resurrection. The 5 members of the Justice League, gathered up by Batman and Wonder Woman, realize they can't save Earth without Superman, who's no longer with them, so they use one of the 3 mother boxes, the source of infinite energy everyone is fighting to possess, to raise Clark Kent from the dead. A plot twist that was there in the 2017 version, but that's the thing, it was just there. Here, the hard-won reawakening of Superman becomes a transporting saga of its own. The new Justice League exudes a majestic sense of cosmic, historical evil. Its tone is reminiscent of other DC or Marvel movies than of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's less reminiscent. The camaraderie among the superheroes is vastly deepened, with the cheeseball wisecracks excised. They develop a moving affinity for each other. In one of the many examples of how sharpened Snyder's filmmaking is, Ezra Miller's Flash is introduced with far wittier dialogue than anything Joss Whedon came up with, followed by a mesmerizing bullet time sequence in which he saves a young woman from a car accident. An episode that beautifully sets up the hidden empathy of his speed of light character. Gal Gadot's Diana has the stalwart but tensely trepidatious presence that got fumbled in Wonder Woman 1984. Ray Fisher's Cyborg has acquired the resonance of a half-machine Hamlet, and Ben Affleck's Batman is like a different character. With all that Ben-friendly banter gone, he embraces the gruff-voiced, dread-tinged, sinister Bruce with sterling command. Beyond that, this has to be one of the most visually spellbinding comic book movies ever made. The clashing battles never give you that wary, here's some more CGI feeling, because they've been staged with a supreme conviction that's more Seven Samurai than super invincible. Ciarán Hinds' Steppenwolf, with his horns of evil, is still the prime antagonist, but while he seemed a trifle effete in the 2017 version, here he's been reimagined as a splendid Hulk covered in gleaming herringbone platelets that bristle with his emotion, and he's also a disgraced assassin who will stoop to the unspeakable. And then I won't read any more, but you get it. And I love that what he was discussing there, what he was saying, is kind of how I feel about these stories in general. I mean, you know, as a kid who grew up reading about Wonder Woman and Superman, I want those grand, mythical tales of, you know, Olympian gods. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Now, in Superman, in the original Superman, of course, Christopher Reeve's Superman, they very much humanized him. And I think that while that's fine, is that something that really we wanted from Superman. I mean, I think it kind of is. I mean, a lot of people like seeing Superman brought down to earth, so to speak. And certainly they're doing a pretty good job of it on the new CW Superman. But I don't know. Like, there's something to me. I always wanted to see Superman larger than life. Big, on top of Olympus. Now here is the Hollywood Reporter. So we've got Variety. Now we've got the Hollywood Reporter review of Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is pretty much diametrically opposed to what Owen Gleiberman is writing. And here's the headline here for Hollywood Reporter. Snyder returns with a 4-hour version of the comic book film he left during post-production in 2017. And then it goes on, and here's what he says. By the way, this article is by John DeFore. John says, the new version is an improvement in some concrete ways. Its plot and tone are more coherent, with occasional puzzling exceptions. Its visual effects are substantially improved, though sometimes fakey. Fakey, dude? Come on, you're going to use the word fakey? I used that word when I was 6. And in general, the photography looks better, though viewers may resent the frame's nearly square aspect ratio, which was designed with IMAX, not widescreen TVs in mind. But the movie's soul, such as it is, remains unimproved, and at 242 minutes, very few of them offering much pleasure, it's nearly unendurable as a single-sitting experience. If it were watched in parts, title cards identify 6 chapters and an epilogue, and some rumors suggest it would be released as a series, those segments would fail to deliver the shapely balance of energies and pacing that one expects these days from even a merely competent TV show. Now, what's really interesting about this review is he's now saying that this movie doesn't provide the pacing of a television show. Now, I'm telling you, as I told you at the beginning, I'm all about watching slow motion waves crash over Arthur Curry, or Jason Momoa as Aquaman, as he's standing. I mean, that to me, there is joy that I gain as an imagination connoisseur watching a mythic being like Aquaman, an Atlantean, well, half Atlantean, watching him. That's an exhibition of his power. So right then and there, that image, the slow motion imagery, that's hitting my core, the very soul of my imagination connoisseurship on a gut level, and it's providing entertainment, a level of entertainment that goes beyond watching just the story unfolding. The imagery itself becomes its own reward, and that's one of the things that Zack Snyder, I think, is good at. I don't love all of Zack Snyder's movies. But one of the things I have loved in Man of Steel, in Batman v Superman, especially the Ultimate Cut, Dawn of Justice, and I would assume this from everything I've seen, is the imagery alone is something like if that movie had no dialogue and no soundtrack, I could probably, if it was just hanging on a wall in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and I was just watching the images, I could probably sit there the whole time for 4 hours and just watch the images because they would appeal to me on some level. But in this review right here, this other review, these segments would fail to deliver the shapely balance of energies and pacing that one expects these days from even a merely competent TV show. This expanded version may be exactly the product desired by the legion of Snyder fans who cried to the heavens for its release, but non-members of that cult will find it just as unenjoyable as the original. Now, what's really interesting about that is this isn't, again, it's not reviewing necessarily the film at hand. It starts talking about what people do and don't like. Like, look, if I want to watch Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris or Stalker, his Stalker especially, some people would say it's like watching paint dry. Where's the pacing? Why am I watching these long, languid takes? Terrence Malick's movies, for instance. You know, a lot of people don't dig his later films. I watch The New World. I'm completely mesmerized and captivated. I watch The Thin Red Line, same thing. There are people like, nah, I don't dig it. And I get that. I understand. But what I don't like is that it's not as if this kind of imagery is easy to make. And I think that obviously it's clear anybody who is an astute reviewer of cinema would understand that sometimes these slow motion images are it's clearly his intent. And isn't there something enjoyable there? So, let me go on and say sometimes the aggressive nature of the noise they made and how others responded to it is relevant because it makes a couple of moments in the film seem like they just might demonstrate some wry self-awareness. When the horned monster called Steppenwolf brings his minions to the site of a Russian nuclear disaster, for instance, he gazes around at his new home and crows, "It's toxic. That's good." On the other hand, this dude also just boasted he was about to begin the Great Darkness, which would suggest he hasn't seen the two glowering films preceding this one, or any of the strenuously gloomy, turgid pictures that define Snyder's macho aesthetic. Well, clearly I understand that the movie is not for this particular reviewer. But what's really interesting is in reviewing this work, suddenly we're moving outside of the film, and now we're bringing in an assessment of Snyder's entire oeuvre, or we're talking about glowering films preceding this one. I get it. There's a lot of people that just don't dig it. There are people that are not imagination connoisseurs the way say, well, not all of us. I expect not all of you are going to love the Snyder Cut either. Stripped of nearly all of what might have been called jokes in the 2017 film, Justice League largely maintains a testostericious monotony from its first chapter, in which Bruce Wayne travels to an Icelandic fishing village to ask Aquaman to join him in fighting an unspecified intergalactic menace. A strong man is stronger alone, Water Bro grunts, stripping off his shirt and descending into the sea. As a group of Icelandic women perform a quiet song of farewell, an early example of the kind of cinematic gold the Snyder Cut rescues from Whedon's cutting room floor. Well, what's interesting to me about the disdain in this paragraph is this reviewer clearly finds no wonder at all in this kind of imagery. He's already made up his mind. And I always thought that, whenever I watch a movie, every time I try and watch it with a clean slate. I clear my mind of expectations, and the work itself should be what speaks to you. If you're already going in there going, well, all of other Zack Snyder's films are... Look, even with every episode of Star Trek Discovery, I watch every episode thinking, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the one that I'm finally going to say, you know what? This was good. I do. And it's really interesting that this review goes on to say, while the specifics have changed, the film's overall idea is the usual end-of-everything rigmarole. Steppenwolf, working for a faraway supervillain called Darkseid, is hunting for 3 boxes that, once joined, will doom all of Earth's inhabitants. Banded together after the death of Superman, our heroes must keep those boxes hidden, or failing that, do something amazing. And then he goes on to say, with Snyder focused on posing his action figures, engaging performances are not a priority here, something you notice immediately when Billy Crudup arrives on screen and reminds you what acting looks like. In his 2 brief scenes, Crudup plays the father of the film's other bright spot, the Flash. Young and excitable, Flash serves the Peter Parker function here. Unlike his grim, duty-bound elders, he thinks saving the world is fun. The screenplay doesn't give him enough good lines, and its kid brother energy wears thin, but it's easy to imagine how other filmmakers might, as Patty Jenkins did in the first Wonder Woman, capture what makes this hero tick in a film worth watching. Again, it's all about whether or not you can find value in the very kind of film that this is. And it's interesting to me that it's kind of become, look, there's going to be a lot of people who will hate this movie for the right reasons. I think they can understand none of it worked for them. I get that. I think you have to bring a sense of awe and wonder to a movie like this. And I think a lot of people can do that, but there's a lot of people that just can't. There's a lot of cynicism in the world, and there's a lot of And look, I'm not saying that this is not a criticism of you. I'm not saying that anybody who doesn't like Zack Snyder's work, well, you just don't get it. I'm not saying that at all, because like we always say, your opinions of film and art in general are definitely yours. It's subjective for every person. But I do think that there's some people that dismiss things out of hand when they're missing out on stuff that is worth at least admiring. And in this case, I don't think we're going to get a lot of that. But I do find it very interesting that Variety and Hollywood Reporter had vastly different reactions to this. And I think that's what we're going to see more of. And I've noticed across the board, there was an article, of course, written by Eliana Doctorman today. It was in Time magazine. And, of course, it was bringing more up about the toxic fan base and the Snyder bros who brought the film into fruition and all of that. And then there was the article in the AV Club, which I like to read. The headline being, "The Snyder Cut is a much longer Justice League, but not a better one." And it's written by A.A. Dowd. "There's no alternate reality, no else or bizarro world where the Justice League premiering on HBO Max this week is the only version, the official Justice League. Imagine that Zack Snyder had stayed at the helm of the DC crossover event he was orchestrating, that family tragedy hadn't torn him away from the project, and that Warner Brothers hadn't taken his absence as an excuse to reconfigure the whole film against his wishes. Even under those what-if circumstances, would multiplexes really become the home to a 4-hour R-rated team-building exercise for comicdom's most famous spandex heroes? This, the fabled Snyder Cut of popular or at least persistent demand, is a movie that could only have risen from the rubble of another. It is a maximalist superhero spectacular, twice the length of its previous iteration, that exists because of the troubles that plagued the production, not in spite of them." Sorry, I didn't put that up on the screen. And then it goes on, and everyone talks about the rocky version or the rocky road that this had coming into fruition. "For better or worse, Zack Snyder's Justice League is a reclamation and a blow struck for unchecked artistic ego in the face of endless, if maybe sometimes sensible, notes of meddling studio execs. No one would confuse this cut with its hero pose tableau, Nick Cave needle drops, and depressive Cape Crusaders for the work of any other filmmaker but the one who turned The Man of Steel and The Dark Knight into dueling, sulking Martha's boys with a concerningly wavering respect for the sanctity of human life. Snyder hasn't just realized his original vision for Justice League, the third in a trilogy of dour, bombastic, occasionally striking vehicles for the world's finest and friends. He's expanded it too, and goes on and calling it into an already overcrowded ensemble." And it's just very interesting to see. I think this is going to say more about the ideological divide that we have in our world today, especially in the United States. There's a lot of people who they are never going to accept the mythical nature of superheroes. They want them a certain way. And I think it's almost a litmus test for our culture. Now, does that mean people are going to say, "Well, Rob, what if is the movie good?" I don't know. I'll give you my honest answer at 3:00 in the morning on Thursday, because I'm going to watch it starting at 11 p.m. Wednesday night, and I'll tell you what I think. I will say I'm predisposed to finding joy in the kind of imagery that Zack Snyder presents to us, as opposed to calling it overblown and bombastic, and because that's what I'm looking for. When you go and you buy a metal record, you want metal. Like, I want everything that Zack Snyder is giving us. That's what I want from it. And to go into that, to look at these trailers and go, I was expecting something different. I think, look, this movie apparently is delivering exactly what it promised from the beginning. Now, if you don't like it, I understand that. But it's a really interesting thing because it's not going to ever be judged as the movie. I think Owen Gleiberman did a good job of it. But I think everybody else is talking about what surrounded it, the dramas, and I think that the sheer joy of the film itself might be getting lost. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. It's interesting. But the way the film has been received, there's no real middle ground. It's very interesting, and I think it says more about where we are as a culture than maybe about where this movie is or where Zack Snyder's vision is. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what you think about this movie is exactly what we're talking about with our great cultural divides. But it's going to be interesting to see how it's received. I don't know what you guys think. I don't know if you've seen it. I just find it really interesting. And I think this is a conversation that's going to be going on for a long time. I believe it will. So we shall see how that goes. Anyway, there's a lot of letters, as you might imagine. A lot of letters in this show from people. And let's see. I think I'm going to pick one that kind of... Let's see if I can. Oh, I got a great letter from Willow Yang. What should I start with? There's certainly a lot. All right, this one's kind of interesting. This comes from Dallas. Dallas says, "Hi, Rob. It's been quite a while since I've written in, and I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. My fanboy tears are streaming down my face since the fan theories have blown up, tongue firmly in cheek, over this fake Pietro business in Wandavision. To be honest, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. I love the show for the most part. As a non-comic reader but lover of the MCU, I can't get enough of the content they throw at us. Furthermore, I enjoyed most of it, if not all, of the Bryan Singer Matthew Vaughn X-verse for Fox. Evan Peters is Quicksilver. Full stop. We as the audience know this. The filmmakers know this. Agatha Harkness somehow knows this. It wasn't a fan theory in the traditional sense. It was him. Well, it was him until Evan Peters threw the proverbial lightsaber over his left shoulder. To me, it wasn't upsetting because the theory wasn't correct. It was upsetting because the payoff was played for laughs and fell completely flat. The subversion of expectations was not warranted because it didn't add anything to the story, and in my opinion, detracted from it. Agatha picked a random townsman who was identical to the multiverse Quicksilver, Wanda's brother. This J.J. Abrams level of coincidence or convenience writing was a bit rich for me. At best, it was poorly thought out, and at worst, a joke played at the audience's expense. For example, at the end of Guardians 2, we got an Adam Warlock Easter egg. Or did we? She only said Adam. She didn't say Warlock, so it could be the singer of Maroon 5, or perhaps just the firstborn of all creation inside that gold cocoon. We should be on our guard and lower our expectations after this fake Pietro scandal. I know, I'm flogging a dead wallaby, but it wasn't cool, man. It wasn't cool. Set me straight here. Well, Dallas, I got to tell you, I'm in your camp. You know, you don't. I always think about a Phantasm quote. When you pull a gun, you don't pull a gun unless you intend to use it, and you don't use it. You know, you shoot to kill. That's actually, I'm paraphrasing. But I agree with you 100%. You can't bring up Evan Peters. If it was just some random dude, don't make it Evan Peters, because we as the audience, in a way, you're breaking the fourth wall of your own show. And I understand they probably thought that was interesting, but you can't help knowing that there's a multiverse component moving forward. Hell, one of their movies, it was already called Into the Spider-Verse, the animated film over at Sony. And then, of course, we have Multiverse of Madness coming with Doctor Strange in it. So there is an expectation that the multiverse was somehow going to come into play, with all the rumors that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are going to be in the next Spider-Man. To put Evan Peters in the episodes of WandaVision, I think absolutely set up an expectation that to subvert that expectation, for what reason? I mean, that really didn't have anything to do with Wanda's story. And it would have been really interesting if Agatha Harkness really was looking through the multiverse and did pluck someone out that had at least some resonance to Wanda in a different time or a different place. I agree. Doing that, I thought, was, while it was subversive to the audience, it was a fourth wall breaking subversion. And I didn't like that. I thought it was unfair to your astute audience to mess with them like that. I really did. I really do. So I think that you're absolutely correct. Now, to follow that up, Tamis writes in and says, "Hello, Rob. I discovered your channel via Gary over at Nerdrotic, and I've been listening to your live streams for a few months now. Your viewpoints on Star Trek are articulated so well and mirror my own feelings that I end up replaying clips from your live streams to other people to illustrate my own viewpoint. Listening to episode 636, I discovered how upset some people were with WandaVision. I was actually somewhat surprised since I enjoyed it so much. Don't get me wrong, the show has its problems, and I had some concerns from the first half of the series. For example, Monica Rambeau, for me, as a character, was a little one-note. She didn't serve the story very well and ultimately was sidelined in the finale, not to mention Director Hayward turning into a full mustache-twirling villain, but I digress. I don't write things like this very often, forgive me if it meanders or is unclear. Let me start with a little story from my childhood. In grade 8, I was in a French immersion, and our teacher would show us movies in French from time to time to help us learn. One day, she put on a live-action version of The Little Prince. This story meant a lot to her, she told us as much, but the movie was old and campy. So when the kids started to laugh and joke at the movie's expense, she was clearly annoyed. To her credit, she just quieted the class down and calmly said, "Watch it for what it is, not what it isn't." Those words became seared into my brain. They have allowed me to enjoy movies, books, music, and games that others, and a younger version of myself, would openly scorn or scoff at. I think that judging WandaVision by moaning all over the unfulfilled theories is, in my opinion, watching it for what it isn't. People used to ask me why I like the MCU so much, and I would simply say, it's my childhood, come to life on the big screen. I still feel that way to this day, even if we're watching it on the small screen right now. This is in part due to how I believe Kevin Feige and his team approached the creation of the stories in the MCU. It seems to me that they go back to the source material and ask the question, how did this feel? Of course, they use the comics to get the stories and characters, but they also translate how it felt to read those comics. This is exactly what they've done with WandaVision and why I enjoyed it immensely by the end. The day after viewing the final episode, I was in the car with my wife, and we were discussing the show as a whole. I explained to her how remarkable that last episode was to me. My wife was never a comic book fan in her youth, so I know she didn't quite feel the same thing, even though Scarlet Witch is her favorite character. So I felt the need to explain that this was a limited series. WandaVision felt to me exactly like those 6-issue limited runs that we would sometimes get between the big stories and the main titles. These issues allowed smaller, more personal stories to be told. Sometimes they were more dramatic, and sometimes they were action-packed, like Chris Claremont and Frank Miller's 4 issues of Wolverine. We were introduced to some characters that were important to Logan, learned of his samurai ties in Japan, which deepened the mythos of the character, and eventually tied back into the Uncanny X-Men series. No one was expecting the next world-shattering event from these comics. They were small asides to the larger stories being told. They were used to enrich the characters that were the star of that particular book and leave some story threads that could be picked up back on later. This is how WandaVision felt to me, and I think that was the intention. If the movies are the main comic lines, then the shows are the limited series in between. I wanted to write to you because I haven't come across anyone with this viewpoint, which surprises me. I think it's fantastic that so many fan theories spun off of each episode, and it meant fans were engaged. I certainly had my own theories, but with the idea of this being a smaller, more personal story, I never let myself be disappointed if those theories were never realized. Sure, it would have been great for mutants of the multiverse to show up in some fashion, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. With the drought of MCU films that the pandemic has caused, we're so hungry for our crack that is the MCU. With the end of the Infinity Saga, we might be forgetting this is the beginning of a new saga. Thanos wasn't teased in the first Iron Man, and Mephisto wouldn't be here. The next story has to be constructed again, one comic at a time. Sincerely, Tamis. You know what? Great letter. Really like that, and I think you're absolutely right. But the idea is watch what things are, not what they aren't. And I think that's very true of the Snyder Cut as well. Watch it for what it is. I mean, you know, even if you don't dig where Zack Snyder's coming from, can you at least recognize that what Zack Snyder was trying to do, he was either successful at or not successful at? Like, clearly he's bringing you his vision. But if you don't like his vision, I can understand that. But can you judge whether his vision is at least working on the level he wants it to work on? That's what I was trying to do. I watch things for what they are, not what they aren't. At least that's what I try to do. I think this is a great letter, and I want to thank you for writing in. Good stuff. Let's see. This is interesting. JT writes in, "Hey, Rob, I agree with you on Coming to America. Although I was disappointed, it was entertaining, and that's really the most important part. On another subject, I was wondering what's your most anticipated Marvel movie and TV show and DC movie and TV show. For me, it's probably Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Loki, The Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker. Thanks, and have a great day." Well, not surprisingly, JT, yeah, I mean, I thought watching Coming to America, too, I wish the movie was better, but it was apparent to me how much fun they were having making that movie, and I think I was watching it from that perspective, so I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was particularly good, but I liked watching it. I was entertained by it. I just wish it was more entertaining, and it delivered more laughs. And as far as the look, everyone knows that I think my most anticipated Marvel series right now is Moon Knight, only because all the way back to the Bill Sienkiewicz, Doug Mensch run, which is really my love of Moon Knight comes out of the Sienkiewicz Mensch run. Moon Knight's been around he was in the West Coast Avengers. I mean, he's done lots of things, but it was that Batman-esque film noir Mensch and Sienkiewicz run that ran from issue 1 to 30 that I really loved. I mean, that was my love of Moon Knight. But in terms of my most anticipated movie right now, it's Eternals. I can't wait to see Eternals. I don't have any sense of what it's going to be like. They say it's going to cover 1,000 years or tens of thousands of years. It's going to be a different movie than we've got from them before. And to be honest, Shang-Chi. I've told people I can't believe. I mean, Shang-Chi, they're doing a martial arts film. Tony Leung is probably playing the Mandarin. I don't know, but I love that. Everyone on this channel knows my love of Tony Leung. So there you go. And as far as DC is concerned, James Gunn's Suicide Squad looks bonkers, and I can't wait to see it, to be honest. And I think the TV show, it was probably the Superman, and I'm enjoying it so far. I really am enjoying it. So yeah. This comes from a long-time imagination connoisseur, Ian Samuels. This is a little different, but I'm glad you wrote it. Rob, the world of sports has lost two of its greatest legends. As a child in the 1980s, one of the things I used to enjoy watching on my television was boxing. Even though I enjoyed the heavyweights, other than Mike Tyson in his prime, much of the time the heavyweights often seemed slow and lumbering. Middleweight, on the other hand, still had some power but with more speed. And one of the masters of this weight was Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Some of my clearest memories of the battle Marvelous Marvin had with Sugar Ray Leonard. Of course, there was the fight called The War, where Marvelous Marvin took on Thomas the Hitman Hearns. And a war it was. Hagler fighting through blood pouring from a cut on his head and later revealed the pain from a broken left hand, even though all that Hearns was on the even through all that, Hearns was on the back foot as Hagler plied on the pressure. piled on the pressure. At just 66, boxing has lost one of its greats. You know, a lot of people loved why can't I talk today? Why can't I read this letter? Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He was a beloved figure, and we did lose him too young. The other legend is Formula One commentary legend Murray Walker, once described by Australian comedian and presenter Clive James as, he sounds like an Englishman whose trousers are on fire. He brought excitement to his commentary. Droves would tune in to watch F1 just to hear his views. He started as a young commentator for the BBC for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in 1949. He had a long and successful career being the voice of some of the most amazing and tearful moments in Formula One history. The death of British great Jim Clark in 1968, the death of, Joaquin Rindt in 1970, and his poor widow collecting the prize at the end of the series after he became the only posthumous Formula One world champion. The Proust and Hunt rivalry later immortalized in the movie Rush, and of course the career and tragic death of Ayrton Senna. Murray Walker passed away at age 97. If he was a cricket commentator, I'm sure they would have said he had good innings. Two of sports greats remembered. Ian. Well, Ian, thanks for that letter. That's not something we normally get from you. I'm glad you wrote in. I know that Alexander Wilson was talking about Marvelous Marvin Hagler the other day, and it's nice that you wrote in, somebody from the other side of the pond remembering him as well. So, again, thank you for writing in. Very much appreciated. Hope you're doing well. This one comes from Pookie Poo. Pookie Poo. Hi, Rob. I've been watching your channel for over half a year now, and I thought it would be a good time to finally send a letter. I want to talk about Star Wars, specifically Star Wars fans. In my opinion, there are two types of Star Wars fans. The first group are people who love Star Wars itself, and these are the true fans. And then there are people who just love Star Wars films. The latter are fake fans. Let me explain. Most people don't actually like Star Wars. They haven't immersed themselves in the universe. They haven't read the books and comics or played the video games. They just like the movies. But even that isn't true. Most of these people hate the sequels, and they certainly hate the prequels. So what about Star Wars do they like? I'll tell you what they like. The original trilogy are better. Better yet, just the first two films. They don't even like Return of the Jedi because Ewoks or something. They only like A New Hope, which they stubbornly call Star Wars, and of course, The Empire Strikes Back. These people claim to be Star Wars fans, but most of them don't even know the difference between a clone trooper and a stormtrooper. They're that casual. It's pretty frustrating to me whenever I hear someone claim they're a fan of Star Wars only to find out they just like the first two movies. Most of them don't even know that Star Wars novels exists. It's just so aggravating, Rob. Whenever someone claims to be a Star Wars fan, I always have to assume that they aren't a fan of the stars, but only a fan of the two movies, and couldn't care less about Star Wars itself. I'm curious to hear what you and this wonderful community think about this, and I'm looking forward to writing many more letters in the future. Uh-oh, Pookie Poo. Well, first of all, thanks for writing in. I don't know if you're going to dig my answer to this, though. And I only say this because as a Star Wars fan who was there when Star Wars opened, opening weekend, I saw it on the Sunday of opening weekend, it was only Star Wars. That was it. There was no one had announced there was going to be a sequel. The Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the first Star Wars novel, didn't come out until a few years later. I think it actually came out in 1978. And then we got the Han Solo trilogy, Han Solo at Star's End. Han Solo, there was then the Lando Calrissian trilogy with Lando Calrissian and the Flame Wind of Ocean and Lando Calrissian and the Mind Harp of Sharu. Then we had the Marvel Comics, and things went from there. 3 years later, we got The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I have to tell you, I think of the, what do we got now? If we include the Clone Wars movie, so you got 9 Skywalker saga films, you've got Solo, you've got Rogue One, and you have the Clone Wars movie. So there's 12 Star Wars feature films. Then I guess you could include the Ewok Adventures, the two of them, the 2 Ewok movies. But honestly, I think here's the thing. As a fan of cinema, Star Wars changed my life. It did. I love Star Wars. I saw The Empire Strikes Back in the theater 26 times. I thought The Empire Strikes Back plussed Star Wars. And they were amazing achievements in filmmaking. Return of the Jedi was the most disappointing movie I have ever seen in my entire life, even to this day. And while a lot of people go, it's the first Star Wars movie they saw in the theater. And yes, I will grant you, the confrontation between Vader and Luke in that film is terrific. It's terrific. But the only two scenes in that movie that really have any resonance are the rescue of Han Solo, the protracted opening, and the end. Nothing else that happens in that film. Sure, you get to watch the Ewoks and they have to destroy the shield generator and there's all that. But having a second Death Star, a battle above that Death Star, all of that stuff, it didn't take me anywhere I hadn't really been. Sure, those speeder bikes were cool, But as far as a movie that got into my soul, when I saw Empire Strikes Back, I couldn't see it enough. The resonance of Luke's training with Yoda and the burgeoning romance between Han and Leia as they were eluding the Imperial Navy and then making their way to Cloud City and meeting Lando Calrissian. I mean, everything was new. It was like, my God, where are we going? Return of the Jedi opens with another unfinished Death Star, and I was like, oh. If you can blow up one Death Star, why can't you blow up the other one? It seems so strange to me. But, and I've always said the prequel trilogy I think they're bad movies, but they're good Star Wars, if that makes any sense. And I think that the real problem with Star Wars, I do know about the books, and I know about the comics, and I have many action figures, which I still collect to this day. And I just think that one of the problems is that Star Wars exists first and foremost as a film franchise. And beyond that, you can't expect anyone to know anything more about Star Wars than what they see at the cinema. And I think you could be a great fan of Star Wars movies and really love Star Wars and say, wow, I will go see every Star Wars movie. That doesn't mean that you have to know anything about anything else. I don't think you do. I don't think that that's necessarily fair. I think what you're talking about is the difference between casual fans and, say, diehard fans. I mean, I'm always reluctant to put a label on fandom because everyone's fandom is different. And I'm like you. Look, when it comes to Star Trek, I have all the novels. I have all the technical manuals. I've got Eagle Moss miniatures and action figures, and I'm steeped in it. But I think I'm an anomaly. I don't think most fans of Star Trek are as deep into it as they are, as I am. I mean, Elizabeth, my girlfriend, loves Star Trek. She's on a Voyager kick. She's binging Voyager as she does her artwork. She just has a TV or the computer constantly playing Star Trek Voyager episodes now. She's working her way through Voyager, and we are now getting in arguments. She likes Voyager way better than Deep Space Nine. I'm like, rrr. But anyway, I think there's different levels of fandom, and I think there's room for everybody. I understand your frustration, and I want to hear from you. I just because you and I might be, I think we're the same. You and I are the same kind of fan, but I think that fandom, you can't always expect people to be as deep into something as you are. But that doesn't mean they don't like it. It just means that their fandom might not be as multi-dimensional as yours. So that's kind of what I would say. Omar94, our friend Omar writes in and says, "Hi, Rob, moderators, and the Post-Geek Singularity. Considering the rise of streaming services, as well as the amount of movies and TV shows out now, I feel we're in a state of overload, as we're having too much content instantly thrown at us regularly. It becomes hard to catch up with everything which is out. More is not always better. I have nothing wrong with all the new movies and TV shows, just as long as there is a good gap of time between the different types of content, since it gives people a breath of fresh air between the breaks rather than having all the content out at the same time. I'm very sparse with what I watch, so I don't watch everything. I saw WandaVision. I'll be watching Falcon and Winter Soldier. I saw Coming to America 2 and Raya and the Last Dragon last week. Whenever Stranger Things came on and will come on, I watched it. I will watch it. I also saw things like The Queen's Gambit, Sylvie's Love, Malcolm and Marie, and others. For every one of those, I missed probably 5 or 10 other things due to the amount of content that's out there. That's just me. I'm sure there are those who love more content. As for them, more is better. I'm just not one of those people. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I think you make a really good point here. I agree with you. You know, I used to, like, I'd see a movie, I'd think about it. Sometimes I'd go see it again. I'd ruminate and muse on what it all meant. Now I feel that there's just so much stuff that it's almost like we have everything now and we almost have nothing because it doesn't resonate anymore. And maybe that's the way it should be, but I find that I watch things, they're in one ear and out the other. They're gone after a few days. I don't even remember watching them. Like, what was that about? I feel like when I binge a lot of shows on Netflix, as much as I like to do that, I'm like, wait, what did I just watch? Those Harlan Coben mysteries that I like, they're all kind of the same after a while. I'm like, wait, who did what to whom? That Hugh Grant, Nicole Kidman series that I just liked, I just watched on HBO. I enjoyed it, but when it was over, it's like, oh, you know, there's nothing has any resonance anymore. It's even starting to affect my love of or desire to get into making movies. I've been working in the film business for 30 years, and it felt so important to me. But lately, it's all just white noise. And as much as I love The Queen's Gambit, I thought it was great, loved it, and yet when it was over, it just slipped out of my mind, and I hate that's what's happening. I don't think it's a function of me just getting older, but it's definitely something I wish wasn't necessarily the case all the time. So I agree. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of playlist selections that I'm compiling, which I think is great. This one comes from our friend William Everall again. William says, "Hey Rob, to answer Claudius's comment, absolutely complete stories are more fun to read, graphic novels, but having limited experience in the field, I know why it's still going monthly. The companies need to make money every month, and at least in the earlier days, artists were starving, so a paycheck meant a sandwich and roof over their head. You can tell who's new to the industry by the amount of work they do. They aren't paid as much at the start, so it's like put out 100 comics to pay rent. But the nice bonus is that they will come out with a graphic novel or omnibus later. I actually have a question for the Post-Geek Singularity members or you, Rob. I'm an imaginative person, and the thing that helped me grow was comics and role-playing games. I started those at age 7. It didn't go well. I cried when my character died in the first room, but later I enjoyed them a lot and ran my group for years as a DM or GM, storytellers. I don't know if I ran things differently, but in our group, you talked in character and acted them out. So my question is, if you played RPGs, did you act out as your characters?" You know what? No, I didn't, but I never will do anything but if I play it again. That's how you should be. You should act out your characters. I don't know why we didn't. We were all in a theater group, so it was natural to us. We tried to bring others in, and they wanted to play these games more like strategy games and felt uncomfortable using different voices and making new personalities. Not many had experience in those games in that age. Anyway, I'm glad to see more positivity in the Post-Geek Singularity lately. The show has been more upbeat, and the members are responding to it as well. So thank you all. The guy who parks his shuttlecraft in the junkyard, William. First of all, you know what? I think that's a very valid thing. I mean, we start developing our imaginations from an early age. I mean, I did with certainly, I read a lot, but then when I would play, I would create these elaborate stories in my mind that would take a whole day to play out. I'd start by, as I've said before, putting like the villains on the other side of the house. And so I would have to like journey to the other side of the house. I loved the hallways and the steps like in our house. I love that. You know, the steps were a giant mountain I had to get down, or there would be a battle on the hills or something. And, you'd have to get to the other side of the house. And that would take hours. And sometimes like I'd have to ask my mom, I'm like, "Mom, are you going to be in the kitchen for the next hour? Can I use it? Can I battle through the kitchen?" There I was sitting on the ground, and I would do it. I would do all the voices and do music and sound effects and everything. And That's how I played with my toys. And I think you're right. That's how we build up our imaginations. And I think I love that. I think that's an amazing way to be. So, yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in. Here's a good one. Let's see. You know what? This is going to get demonetized for this letter, but I'm going to read it anyway because you know where it comes from? Willow Yang. And Willow Yang has done something I might have suggested that she do. I can't believe she did it, and now I kind of feel bad. All right, I'm going to read this letter because you know I love Willow Yang letters. First of all, I think I should say that this letter needs to come with a warning, a viewer discretion advised on this one. For those of you who are new here, Willow Yang is a foundational member of the Post-Geek Singularity. She's a wonderful writer. She's officially a microbiologist. She's a doctor. She has a PhD in microbiology, I think. If I get that wrong, Willow, please tell me. I'm just going to read this. Greetings, Rob. Well, since you've said that you're interested in hearing it, I'm writing a comparison of the infamous and highly controversial rape and revenge film Mir Zarchi's I Spit on Your Grave, a.k.a. Day of the Woman, and its 2010 remake by Stephen Monroe. I watched the remake first after coming across it on Amazon Prime, and against your advice, I decided to check out the original as well. God love you, Willow. The basic story of the two films is virtually identical. A beautiful female writer named Jennifer travels out to a secluded cabin in the woods to work on her next novel. There, she catches the eye of 4 men, 5 in the remake, who brutally torment and gang rape her. Jennifer survives the incident, recovers, and exacts brutal vengeance on the rapists. I will begin with some general overall impressions. I didn't particularly like either movie. And just to be clear, I'm talking strictly about the quality and not the subject matter or morality. I had major issues with the writing in both films, and yes, I do understand they're grindhouse movies and not meant to be Shakespeare or The Godfather. Now, when it comes to acting, the remake did really manage to impress me. For a low-budget exploitation film with a cast of unknowns, the performances and lines of dialogue are surprisingly very good and believable. The acting in the original isn't bad per se. I thought Camille Keaton did a fairly good job, whereas the remaining actors were serviceable in their roles. I do realize that I'm probably biased here. Acting has evolved over the decades, and I might just be more partial to the style of the modern era. Having said that, I do think the performances in the remake are superior. In spite of the almost identical story, the aesthetics of the two films do differ considerably. The color palette for the remake is very dark and muted. A lot of the movie takes place in the evening or at night, and even during the day it's often dim and gray. The original, on the other hand, is very bright and colorful, with most, if not all, of the scenes taking place during the daytime. And this brings me to the first act of the two movies. I cannot understand why Jennifer would go to the cottage in the remake. The dreary and rather spooky-looking neck of the woods just did not look like an appealing place for a retreat, not unless the person was looking for the inspiration for a horror novel. The first act was really nothing more than that of a typical slasher film with numerous jump scares and scenes of the main female character walking around in her underwear at night and doing pretty much anything other than writing. The original, on the other hand, showed us a beautiful and idyllic setting that does look like a place someone would want to retreat to. And we do see Jennifer actually doing some writing, in between skinny dipping in the river and lying on her hammock in a bikini. For the first act, I do think that the original surpasses the remake, and it manages to subvert the typical horror tropes. Now on to the second act. Of course, I have to discuss the most notorious and controversial part of these movies, the violent gang rape of the main female character. The remake is less graphic with regards to the nudity and sexual violence. The rape itself is actually more of an afterthought. It comes secondary to the taunting, humiliation, and degradation that Jennifer experiences at the hands of her assailants. And that is something that I really liked about the movie. I thought it did a great job of illustrating the fact that a lot of time rape isn't really about sex, but more about the feeling of power that rapists have over their victims. While the original did touch on this a bit, the focus was much more on the physical violence and not nearly as much on the psychological aspects. Both movies were certainly very effective in shocking the viewer and making them feel very uncomfortable. However, I do think that the remake was more ambitious. It's easy to just put something abhorrent and offensive on the screen. Being able to repulse the audience without relying solely on shocking imagery, however, is harder to do. And that is something I have to commend the remake for achieving. And with that, we've reached the part where my main issue for both films begin: the aftermath of the violent rape. The remake never bothered explaining what happened to Jennifer. She simply leaps into a river, is gone for a good section of the movie, and then reemerges again as pretty much an avenging superheroine. The original, on the other hand, did explain how Jennifer survived the assault, but in doing so, it just made all the characters cartoonishly stupid and unbelievable. The man, after violently raping Jennifer a third time in her cottage, orders Matthew, the weakest and stupidest member of their gang, to kill her. Of course, nobody bothers accompanying him to make sure that he actually got the job done, and then a few weeks later, they worry about someone finding her body. Never mind the fact that they could have tied some rocks to her and thrown her into the river that was just a few steps away, and they openly discuss their crime in the middle of a crowded diner in broad daylight. Meanwhile, Jennifer remains in the cottage even though her assailants could easily have broken in again, and she even ventures out to sit by the river in a bikini. Sorry for my language, but what the fuck? The behavior of the characters in the remake, by comparison, was much more realistic. However, as I've stated earlier, the movie completely skipped addressing how Jennifer survived the incident. I really don't know which bothered me more here, the unbelievable idiocy of the characters in the original or the complete non-explanation of the remake. I'll just leave this one a tie. Finally, there is the revenge, the gruesome comeuppance that the rapists get in the final act. Again, as was with Jennifer's survival, I had issues with both films. The remake, as I've alluded to earlier, pretty much just turned Jennifer into a superheroine who is able to devise elaborate Saw-style traps for her assailants. I get that this is a grindhouse revenge fantasy, but the tone of the film just feels inconsistent. The movie couldn't seem to decide on whether it wants to be a schlocky horror film or more grounded and realistic. The first act was that of a typical slasher. The second act really impressed me with its solid performances, dialogue, and the very realistic depiction of a rape, and then the movie pretty much reverts back to being a ridiculous slasher in the third act. The original, of course, enabled Jennifer to get her revenge by having all the villains be brain-dead morons. In spite of my problems with both movies, I would ultimately still give the slight edge to the original, just for its superior depiction of the infamous emasculation scene. The scene in the remake was quick and relatively painless. We see Jennifer snipping the rapist with a giant pair of shears. There's some blood and some screaming, but then it's all over. The original, on the other hand, really draws it out. There was a much better build-up and anticipation as we see Jennifer sneaking a knife into the bathtub where her idiotic and completely oblivious victim is waiting. While I do not think the scene is particularly realistic, if you're bleeding that profusely, you're probably just going to pass out and not spend a whole lot of time screaming and running around. It certainly is very effective and cringe-inducing in a good way. In conclusion, I did not think that either version of I Spit on Your Grave was all that great. I'm hard-pressed to decide which of the two was better, or worse. For me, the remake had stronger performances and dialogue, more believable characters, and a more riveting second act, whereas the original had a stronger opening, more memorable kills, and a more consistent tone overall. In spite of my criticisms for both movies, however, they each certainly had their moments, and I enjoyed, although maybe enjoy isn't the most appropriate word to use here, both enough that I don't regret having taken the time to watch them. Best regards, Willow. You know what, Willow Yang? Every time you send me in a letter, I fall in love with you more and more. This is probably the best analysis of I Spit on Your Grave either of these two movies have ever received, and I very much appreciate you taking the time to watch both, and even more so, writing such a thoughtful comparison of the two. My God, what a community we have. So, thank you very much for that one, Willow. Wow. Crazy. Let's jump and see what any of you are saying now. I don't know what you are saying, but let's jump into it. Let me go back here and find out where we are at. Well, you know what? Let me get rid of all of these so I don't see the subscribers so much. But I thank everybody for coming back. I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Star Wars Rocks says, the one thing I don't like about the Snyder Cut is the fact that I'm not going to be able to watch it because HBO Max, unfortunately, isn't available in Gibraltar. Sucks to be me, I guess, and we're a British overseas territory. What about using a VPN and circumventing everything and getting an HBO Max subscription? Not that I would advocate that. Just a thought. Joe Hawkins became a member of the channel. Thanks, man. Anthony MR sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, to prepare for the Eternals, I've been reading the original Jack Kirby run. With this movie coming out, do you think we'll get closer to a Silver Surfer announcement within the next 2 years? You know, obviously, I think that we're first going to see Silver Surfer as the herald of the real Galactus. So I think we're going to have to wait for a Fantastic Four film, because I think the Silver Surfer, while obviously the Silver Surfer could stand alone, they could make a Silver Surfer movie on their own, I guess. I still think it would be more of an adjunct to the Fantastic Four. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen in 2 years. It totally could. It might. I just don't know. Dakota says, not a popular opinion, but let's say that Stephanie Meyer did take someone else's ideas for Twilight. An idea is just that, an idea. It is whoever puts it to paper first, the first to get it published. Anyways, keep your ideas to yourself until written in full. Dakota, I agree with that. I mean, look, you know, people could say that I love the movie Near Dark that Catherine Bigelow directed. The idea of a child vampire that we see in that movie, a kid that was turned when he was too young, is never going to get older. Anne Rice sort of pioneered that idea in Interview with a Vampire, but Near Dark was made before they made an Interview with a Vampire movie. So you could say ideas are just that. And I do believe that, you know, it's one thing to have an idea. There's a lot of, when you're dealing, especially in genre, when you're talking about vampires and werewolves and things like that, there's so many things that have already been done in the past, and so certain things lead you in certain directions. So the idea that people have the same idea doesn't surprise me. So yeah, you should keep your ideas to yourself. I agree. Willow's back with a tip. She says in a tip, and she says, I didn't think Indecent Proposal was that great of a movie, but I do like the premise. What would you do in that situation? Would your answer be different if the roles were reversed, i.e. it was a rich woman asking to spend the night with you? Well, for those of you who don't, I think it was Woody Harrelson. Was it Woody Harrelson, Demi Moore, and Robert Redford? So the premise of Indecent Proposal was Robert Redford offers the wife of a couple, offers the couple $1 million if he can sleep with the wife. I'm of the opinion it would depend if my relationship was strong enough, and I'd take the $1 million. Yeah, I'm sure if some older woman offered me $1 million to sleep with her, I even think Elizabeth would be like, take the money. Let's get a house. I mean, you know, I think nowadays, I don't think it's such a bad, I don't think it's necessarily the kind of thing. I mean, you know, people are watching cuckolding videos on Pornhub, and they get off watching their wives sleep with other men or husbands sleep with other women. I mean, people I think are a little bit more open to those ideas, especially when there's $1 million involved. So I don't think I would have. It would depend. I mean, it would depend. I mean, the whole obviously the peril of the movie, the peril of the situation is if, and I think from a male perspective, if your spouse or significant other sleeps with a really rich guy who also turns out to be great in bed, where does that leave you? Love conquers all. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I could hang with that. That's a really hard thing to do. And that's the kind of thing that drives you crazy. That's something. And then, of course, even if your wife comes back as a guy, I'd be like, well, how was it? And if she was like, well, you know, well, tell me. I mean, how about we don't talk about it? It would drive you crazy. I mean, it's the kind of situation that inherently, I think, what I love about the situation is it no matter how, I mean, I guess if you were really, you'd have to be really evolved as a person to not let it bother you. But if your wife came back and there was no problem and you got the $1 million, but I mean, it would be hard. I'd be hard pressed. Like if the guy was like, I mean, if it's Robert Redford, this really good looking rich dude that offers you $1 million and sleeps with your beautiful wife, and like, that's hardcore. So it's, it really just depends how much you need the money. If you need the money a lot, I think you could get over it. It depends. It depends. Power of the Butt. Power of the Butt says, Robert, what are your thoughts on the 70s Star Trek cartoon, the animated series? Is it good? Is it canon? Well, first of all, the animated Star Trek series, there are 22 episodes of it, 2 seasons. It suffers right away, I'll tell you, from very cheap animation. They didn't have a lot of money to spend. They did get most of the voice cast with the exception of Walter Koenig. And so they didn't have Chekhov in the show. They had Mr. Eriks instead and Mares, who's a Cation. But I like it. I think for an animated show that was on Saturday mornings, they brought back a lot of the script writers from the original series. You've got the voice cast, although I think there was only one time when they were ever all in the room together. So the voice acting is a little stilted, and the obviously the animation is limited. But there's great stories, and some of it is canonical. Like they said Yesteryear was canonical, which is a wonderful Star Trek episode. And the idea that Robert April, who was introduced in the last episode, the counterclock incident, was also part of Star Trek canon. I always thought of it as canonical. Like when I was a kid, when I was first watching Star Trek, I'd been watching Star Trek probably for a year or two before the animated series, probably a year. And then the animated series followed right on the heels of it going into strip syndication. So I just assumed that animated Star Trek was... there were things about it that I didn't buy into, like some of the shuttlecraft designs. I'm like, what is this? There's kind of a, it looks like an old Rolls-Royce starship, or a shuttlecraft. That I like the Aqua Shuttle. But for the most part, I liked it, and I do think of it as canon. There's a couple of great episodes. Plus, Tribbles came back, Harry Mudd came back. I'll tell you one thing, the portrayal of Harry Mudd in the animated series is better than what they did in Star Trek Discovery. So... but you know, not to I don't want to bag on that kind of thing so much. Casey McNatt sends in a tip and says, well, Rob, it's finally happened. Since China re-released Avatar into the theaters this weekend and it was able to take back its worldwide box office crown. So what Casey is referring to is that we all know that Endgame, Avengers Endgame, beat Avatar as the #1 top grossing film at the box office worldwide when it came out 2 years ago. But they did a special re-release of Avatar in in China this past weekend, and it did quite well. Like, it didn't just eke past. I mean, it made like 20 million, 21, something like that. I think they still have 3D theaters in China as well. And look, Avatar is an extraordinary cinematic experience at an IMAX theater in 3D. It's extraordinary. So it doesn't surprise me that it made a lot of money in China, because there's a lot of people that never saw it in the theater. I think Avatar is the kind of movie, if they were to put it back in the theaters in IMAX, I mean, people forget. You know, everyone makes fun, oh, it's Pocahontas in space. You got to go see it in 3D in IMAX, because it's like, oh my God. The scene where they learn to ride the dragons, unbelievable. Some incredible fantasy filmmaking. So, yeah. Good stuff. But thanks for writing in about that, Casey. Fake Savick sends in a tip and says, Rob, I urge the Post-Geek Singularity to give a second chance to Paul Schrader's Autofocus. I loved Autofocus. An underrated character study of the late actor Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes as a man unable to escape his demons. Great Greg Kinnear performance as well. Underrated. See it. I saw it when it came out, Fake Savick, and I think you're right. I think it's a great film. It really is a good movie. I thought it was really well done. And the Kinnear's performance is great. Fake Savick goes on to say, also, I hate to slam actors, but Robin Curtis was a sad replacement for Kirstie Alley, whose take on Savick was sexy and bewitching. Curtis's take on Savick was so boring. Though she's very attractive, I feel she brought little to the role. Bad recasting. Well, Fake Savik, that's hence you got your name, Fake Savik. I would encourage all of you to look up last week's episode of the Inglorious Trexperts podcast. I was not on that podcast, where they interview Robin Curtis, and it is very much worth your time. If you're not a fan of Robin Curtis, you will be after you listen to that episode. But look, I agree with you. I was never a fan of Robin Curtis's performance as Savik. I think that the idea, and it was cut out of the movie, it was obviously in the novelization, and maybe it was restored in the director's cut of Star Trek 2, but the idea that Savik was half Romulan and half Vulcan, I always liked that she was more passionate, and Kirstie Alley is incredibly sexy as Savik, and she works really, and I understand what Leonard Nimoy was doing, directing Robin Curtis, pulling her back from that emotional brink, but I don't think necessarily works. So yeah, Bunyan Snipe, our boy from the UK, one of our moderators, says, why does everyone think The Devil Went Down to Georgia is the first song on this subject? It was written in 1979. Skip James recorded The Devil Got My Woman in 1931. I would start there. Oh, you know what? That came from me. I said I was just going to put that on as the beginning of the record because I thought it was a nice song to start with. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't going to do a playlist in chronological order, but yeah, I mean, there's better songs to start with, and I agree with you. I Devil Got My Woman. I'll look into that because I think that would be a great idea. Ross Gecko sends in a super chat and says, it must be tough for a director to read negative reviews, especially cynical ones. How did you get any negative reviews for the great Free Enterprise? Did they ever affect you? Oh, Ross. For the most part, so many people know that I made a movie called Free Enterprise that I directed, I co-wrote, and I edited. People either loved it or hated it. It was either a piece of trash or they really, really liked it. And you which is great. I love the fact that it was polarizing. And look, I knew all about the shortcomings. Hell, it's 22 years later and I'm still trying to get a deal so I can do the definitive version of it and make it the way I really want it. But you live and learn. For me, I don't take criticism of my work personally. And when people do criticize it, I really do find it as an opportunity to learn because of the reviews at the beginning of this episode, talking about the fact that people come at things from very different angles. A lot of people criticize Free Enterprise. A lot of Star Trek fans didn't like the sexual content in it. And they didn't like the fact that I got a lot of criticism. Oh, these characters, this wish fulfillment, they're having sex with pretty girls all the time. And I'm like, well, I was trying to accurately recreate my experience in my 20s and 30s. So what can I say? But, it was something that people, they didn't like and I'll admit to you, the Free Enterprise is problematic from a storytelling standpoint. I mean, Shatner leaves, and because we had to change the script so late into the process, the romantic element and the Shatner story never really coalesce. So there's things about Free Enterprise that I know are not as good as they could be, and were based on issues we had. We had to do, when you're making a low budget indie movie, you do the best you can. So to me, I mean, I've never taken criticism like that personally. You read it because usually, especially filmmakers are a lot more self-aware about their work than they know. I mean, they know. Some people don't, but for the most part, I've found that filmmakers, everybody's very aware of their shortcomings. What I think the kind of criticism that I find not helpful is like when people said, "Oh, I just hate William Shatner. I don't think he's a good actor." I'm like, he was a really good actor in our movie, and I took great pride in that. And it was those kind of things that I know are wrong. I'm just, okay, you're just wrong. You're just finding something. I don't like that. I like constructive criticism, or I like people that somebody said. It's on Amazon. There's a review where someone says they called this isn't a movie, this is a thing. I threw mine in the garbage. One guy was so offended by the language and the sex he just threw his discs in the garbage. And that's what he wrote. And I'm like, well, clearly, you've certainly never kissed a girl before. And I feel more sorry for you than you feel for me. But it's always very interesting. Actually, I kind of like it. I mean, when people tell you that they love things that you've done, it's great. It feels really good. But I learn more when people tell me about things they didn't like. So, but it is tough because, you work on something for 2 years and somebody trashes it in a paragraph. It's like, well, okay. I spent the last, like Tango Shalom was a project I've been on for half a decade, on and off, and I know that it is what it is. It was conceived to be this thing that was made for what it was made for, and it had all these production difficulties, and I'm just proud of what we were able to do with it and how we made it work. Is it the greatest movie in the world? I wouldn't say so, but I think for what it is, it's the best version of the movie that we could have made. I don't think there's a better version of Tango Shalom out there. So the criticisms people that can level at it are probably not, they're probably absolutely correct. It's just that, we have to deal with the reality of what we had to deal with. So, yeah. Stub McShave says, concerning the letter about Pietro, the reason that some people felt a sense of betrayal and disappointment was that Pietro was a gun. He was Chekhov's gun that they placed on the mantelpiece, and when they didn't use the gun, they broke a central writing rule. Stubble, I agree with you very much. I completely agree with you about the Pietro situation. I thought that was a cheat. As a matter of fact, I think, in my mind, one of the biggest missteps Marvel has made is that casting, and to not use it in an effective way. I thought it was really unique, and I was looking for a really unique answer. I thought they'd have a really interesting, creative answer because, like you said, Pietro was a gun. And what Stubble means is, Chekhov talks about that. Like if you're going to bring a gun into a scene, into a story, in a piece of drama, you have to use the gun. Otherwise, you don't bring the gun into the scene, because when you do that, you've set up the expectation in the audience's mind, and if they're going to be thinking about that all the time. And if you're not going to have it come into play later, then you've distracted the audience needlessly, and I think your story falls down. So, Brandon Shee says, Rob, do you ever get a sense of John Borman's Excalibur from Zack Snyder's comic book works? Both favor striking imagery and elegant reverence to the source material over a traditionally entertaining story, and badass Syrian Hines is in both of them. I do. Excalibur is Zack Snyder's favorite movie. I mean, that's why you see it on the marquee in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and at the beginning when the Waynes are killed. And I think that I agree with that. I think that's probably true. Yeah. Dakota says, 1 of 2. How can you fully trust movie critics anymore? Prime example, read some of the reviews for Rambo: Last Blood. If a movie is a dud, then give the merits of why it's a dud, and not because they think the movie is being racist by bringing up Trump in it. The review, just give us the basic merits of why they think the movie was bad. Personally, I thought Rambo: Last Blood kicked ass. Well, I have 2 versions of Rambo: Last Blood. I've got the longer version and the shorter version. Although, like my compatriot Dieter Bastian said, I think the last version works. I mean, the original version works better. I agree with you. I mean, I think nowadays, I think film criticism is essentially dead. I think back to, like, I used to really like Drew McWeeney's reviews, Moriarty on AICN, and now he's still doing some good stuff. But I think that people are films are no longer considered the art forms that they used to be. Certainly the Pauline Kaels of the world have gone away, but there's still some good film criticism out there. But look, I agree with you. I think there's just a lot of bad film criticism, which is a bummer. Devin Hilton says, honest answer, should I work hard to meet the deadline for the short story contest, or will the contest be delayed because of the film festival? Is it a hard deadline? The hard deadline for the film festival is going to be May 31st now. So you have more time, just because I want to finish the film festival and get it all done. So you have May 31st is the deadline. So yeah, you have that time. Ooh, Tony Reyes sends, "Hi Rob, I just finished rewatching Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and like a fine wine, these films to me got better with every watch. Question: what if Warner Brothers had started the DCEU with a Justice League film, and then all the individual character films later? Would it work?" You could absolutely. It depends how you do it. There have been team building movies before. I love building team movies, like The Dirty Dozen. Movies like that, when they assemble a team to go do something. Guns of Navarone, or Where Eagles Dare, or even William Friedkin's movie Sorcerer. So it can be done. It can be done well. I would rather have seen individual movies leading up to a Justice League film, because you anticipate that. If you make a Justice League movie and then you go back and do solo films, it's like, oh, why don't you? If there's a problem, why aren't you calling your JLA buddies to come help you? And I like the anticipation of it. I thought what Marvel did was great, because Marvel, you introduce the characters and you put them together. That's what they did in the comics. So, I think, yeah. I mean, I would much rather see the individual movies. But that said, apparently, the consensus is at the end of Justice League, now you're left with wanting to see, like somebody mentioned in one of the reviews, they really want to see the Terminator Batman movie. I cannot wait to see the Terminator Batman movie. I cannot wait. I really, really, really want that. So, just because I love the Terminator, I think it'd be so good. Carlos Fontes says, "Hey, Mr. Rob, are there any movies in a similar situation like Justice League that you'd like to see completed and finally released?" Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think so. I think this is a very different situation. I can't really think of anything quite like this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. This is a very interesting, extreme example. The one I would go back to is the Exorcist films, the Rennie Harlan version and the Paul Schrader version. They made the Paul Schrader version, then they basically remade the whole thing with Rennie Harlan, but they released them both, so you could see them both. And it was also Warner Brothers, so that's kind of how I see it. Paulus Plain says, "Zack Snyder's Justice League is available on HBO Nordic. P.S. Love from Norway." Is it really? Can you watch it in Norway? That is amazing. That's good to know. I did not know that. Claudius sends in a tip and says, "Bonsoir, Robert." What, I got nothing from you, Claude? That's it? But thanks. I appreciate supporting the channel, man. Imran Jabbar sends in a super chat and says, "Thoughts on The Devils?" I love The Devils. Ken Russell's The Devils. I used to have it on VHS. I watched a 1080p upscale of the BFI DVD, and man, what a movie. Would love to see the complete version with all the blasphemy. Yes, Ken Russell's The Devils is a movie that Warner Brothers is sitting on because there's somebody at Warner Brothers that doesn't want it released. I suspect I know who it is, actually. But it's a movie that is very blasphemous. It's a nunsploitation movie, if you like nunsploitation movies, but I think it's a very good movie. I actually have, this is a true story. Right over there. I have, movie posters, the regular movie posters you see are called one sheets. So the normal one sheet used to be 27 by 41. So it's 41 inches by 27 inches. And they had a white border, a half-inch border around the poster. Then they took away the border, and movie posters were 26 by 40 inches. So there were different kinds. That became kind of industry standard after 1980. There weren't really many other kinds of posters, but they used to have much bigger posters. So there were 3 sheets instead of 1 sheets. It was 3 1 sheets stacked this way. So they would be 81. What was it? 81? Was it 81 inches? I forget the actual dimensions, but they were 3 times. They're huge. 3 sheets, and then there were 6 sheets. And 6 sheets are 81 by 81 inches. Ginormous posters, which I have. I have a 6 sheet of Soylent Green. I have a Clockwork Orange 6 sheet. These are all originals. And so to display them, they're called like big paper. So I collected big paper. I used to have a massive collection of big paper posters. They're all framed in my old office. I sold my entire collection to the previous company, the Third Floor. So if you know anyone in Hollywood that does any work at the Third Floor, when you go there and you see all those giant posters, those are mine. Those are mine. They have them all. Because I know where to put them. But I have so 81 by 81, that's a 6 sheet. I have a 24 sheet. And a 24 sheet was a billboard. Like, it's billboard. Like a real giant billboard. I have a 24 sheet of The Devils. Now, one day, I thought, kind of like, and you know what, it always comes to mind, St. Elmo's Fire. The movie St. Elmo's Fire, like in Demi Moore's apartment, she had a whole wall painted with Billy Idol. This pink wall with Billy Idol. I thought, I mean, I don't own this house, but I thought that one day I would have a room in a house that I owned, and I was going to put up the Devil's 24 sheet and do a whole wall of that 24 sheet. Why did I buy it? I don't know. I used to be a big poster buyer, movie poster buyer. I don't anymore because they were too big and I had nowhere to put them. But I mean, I still would if I had a big house. I would go back. There's a store, by the way. If you guys are interested in big paper, one of my favorite movie poster retailers. She has the best collection of shit on the planet Earth. And when I say on the planet Earth, I mean it. Her name's Debbie, and she has a store called L'Imagerie. L apostrophe imagination L'Imagerie Gallery L'Imagerie. Call her up and say Rob Burnett sent me here. But she's got the best big paper in the business on the planet Earth. She can get you anything. She has movie poster. You would not believe her inventory. It's insane. The stuff she got me, the stuff that's at the Third Floor that I wish I didn't sell. Mario Bava's Mask of the Demon or Black Sunday. There's only two I could confirm existed in the world. One of them is hanging in the Third Floor. My Italian, I think the 47 by 57? My Italian Zombie, my Italian Dawn of the Dead poster. Those are the two posters I regret selling the most of them, I think. But, yeah, The Devils, one day. So, yeah, I would love to see The Devils. Yeah, bring it out. But that's it, 24 sheet of The Devils. I don't know why I have it. I mean, I bought it because somebody was selling it for like $500. Because what are they going to do with it? I really wanted Star Trek The Motion Picture. Somebody had a Star Trek The Motion Picture billboard. Can you imagine? How cool would that have been? 24 sheet of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I lost it. I lost out. So I bought The Devils instead. Not that I'm ever going to use it. But, because, you know, if I had a wall that was that big, I'd want bookcases up against it. Claudius goes on to say, will the Burnett cut of Tango Shalom feature waves crashing in slow motion around the final tango dance? If your cut, the ceiling should crack open and God herself, Alanis Morissette, should weigh in on the contest. Nope, that does not happen. I can honestly say the cut of Tango Shalom as it exists is, in fact, our definitive cut. Sexual Throglate. Sexual Throglate, my band. Hello, Post-Geek Singularity. My review of the Holly Reporter review of Zack Snyder's Justice League is this. If you find a reviewer biased, dismissive, and a fake intellectual like that jagoff, let him know politely how you disagree with their non-review. I am. Yeah, I thought it was lame. You're not I don't like reviews that are not actually reviewing the film. You know, they bring in all this other stuff. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Alexander Wilson says, when I was listening to Edward Losey interview about Tango Shalom, Star Trek was brought up. He said that Okay, what Alexander Wilson's talking about, well, let me read this. When I was listening to Edward Losey interview about Tango Shalom, Star Trek was brought up. He said that he dated Persis Kambata. What a lucky guy. He also said that there was foul play in her death. Do you know anything about that? Or just forget about it? Oh, I couldn't believe this. Like, I've been sending stuff to Ed. First of all, he has no idea how deep into Star Trek I am. I got to call him. I had no idea. And I tweeted that out today. I was like, oh my God. So for those of you, Ed Losey is a Hollywood publicist. He's been a Hollywood publicist for decades and decades. He is our publicist on Tango Shalom. He says that Persis Kambata, who played Ilea in Star Trek the Motion Picture, and she was also in like Nighthawks and she was in Megaforce, she was a big supporter of Indira Gandhi, and Ed Losey was saying that people think conventional wisdom was that she had a heart attack and died, which always seems strange to me. She was Miss India. She was one of the most strikingly beautiful women that ever lived. Ed Losey said she was murdered by the same people who took out Indira Gandhi. I had never read that before until today, so that's some crazy shit. I don't know. I don't know, Alexander, but I'm gonna call Ed up and find out what is the deal. Crazy. Claudius sends in it's another tip. Burnett Cut 2. On second thought, substitute Alanis Morissette with William Shatner playing the role of God, and at the end of the movie, the camera would pan to you, and you would close the movie by calling it a wrap. That would be very meta. I mean, I'm Moses, I'm not God, just so you know. John says, hi, Rob, for episode 666, how about Devil Delight off Hearts Magazine LP? I'm down with that. I think the Spotify playlist for the 666th episode of Robservations is a fine idea. I can't believe how many people are weighing in on that. So yeah, I'll put it on the list. Gerard Leon says, I can honestly say that my most anticipated movie of the year besides Eternals has to be Dune. Oh, me too. Dune is actually my most anticipated movie of the year. Love the original movie, the books, and even the 2000 miniseries. Since the movie theaters aren't what they used to be, what does it have to do to get a sequel? I don't know, man. From what I understand, and having read the script of Dune, the movie, it's great. But it only covers this first half of the first book. So I have heard that ultimately the plan was to do 3 Dune movies at first. Dune, Dune Prophet, and Dune Messiah. And it would cover the entire Paul Atreides storyline. And for anyone who's read the books, that doesn't end well. It doesn't end well for the galaxy either. But so that's the story, and it's a good question. I mean, if it doesn't come out, I don't know what kind of money they are going to spend on it. I don't even understand why they didn't just make all 3 movies at once. I know it was a risk, but I mean, with streaming, take the risk. With that director and that cast, it seems strange to me. Do it Lord of the Rings style, especially if you're doing the whole Paul Atreides storyline. But I think by then, hopefully, it depends on the budget of the film. I think that a movie like Dune, with what they spent on it, they got to make $800 million worldwide. And look, I love the script. I thought it was great, and I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see it. Cannot wait. Really looking forward to it. The script was really good. Nick Parrish says, what's up, Rob? So with us being about 2 weeks away from Godzilla vs. King Kong, I'm curious, do you think this movie is the make or break for theaters in terms of movie releases trying to stay on track? And what do you think would be good box office numbers? You know what? It's hard to say, because I'll tell you something. The worldwide box office, while maybe in the Asian countries are doing better managing this than we are, there are places, Germany, it's going back up. It's problematic all over the place. So we'll see where America is. Can we keep our theaters open? Are we gonna? I don't know. I think by the time that Godzilla versus King Kong is supposed to open, we're gonna see. Are we gonna have a problem? Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see where we're going to be. But in terms of box office, they want it to be, these box office numbers for these movies that are playing now are still anemic. They need, for a movie like King Kong or Godzilla versus King Kong, they need they want $100 million openings. They can't even, these openings are just not going to suck. They're not going to sustain. They're not going to sustain the movies that are out there. They can't open them. We have to see where we're at. It's a bummer. So I don't know if they're going to be able to keep these. Luckily, Godzilla versus King Kong, as much as I want to see it, it is playing on HBO Max. I'll watch that shit right away. Actually, movie theaters are supposed to have opened in LA today. Let's see. Let's see if they have. Let's see if the ArcLight. Loading up. Nope. No cinemas found. The ArcLight is still. The app is still dead, and as far as LA is concerned, I don't know if, man, I hope they haven't gone out of business. That would really be a bummer. I don't know if the theaters have opened today. We'll see. Alexander Wilson. Oh, Claudia sent in 2 letters, brah. One is comedy, the other tragedy. When did you send them in? Did you send them in today? I will keep on the lookout for those. Alexander Wilson says, you were talking about female actors that were naturally beautiful. I think former Broadway actress and best-selling singer Stephanie Mills fits that description. Oh, she's a hottie. Look at how good she looked in her home music video. Are you a fan of her work? Yes, I am. Stephanie Mills does fit that description. She is absolutely naturally beautiful. Let me see if I can... Let me get find a good picture of her so I can put it in the live chat. Yeah, that's what I thought. She was in The Wiz, which I loved. I love The Wiz. Yeah, I think Stephanie Mills she's a beautiful woman. Here's a good picture of her. Wow, it's for her booking agent and manager too. Here's Stephanie Mills for people who don't know who she is. I'm going to put her in the live chat. But she's been around for a while, man. She's got to be, I don't know, how old is Stephanie Mills now? Not that that's a problem. But she's 63 years old. But she's still working. So there you go. Throg John sends in. Oh wait, I gave you. Don't call Stephanie Mills booking agent. don't. I don't know why I did that. Well, Throg John says, so if Kong wields Stormbreaker in this team-up film, does that make him King Thong? I'll be here all night, a few ladies and gentlemen. You know what? That's bad. First of all, I'm Team Godzilla all the way. Godzilla doesn't have to use weapons. He has abilities. He doesn't need to use them. Alexander Wilson says, oh, I missed his chat about how bad Coming to America 2 is. Really? I haven't seen it. Is it back here? Did it show up? Something weird is going on too with this. I don't know why. I don't think I saw it. Yeah, I don't think I saw it, man. You know what? A lot. I just like it with Coming to America 2. I liked it, but it's not good. Maybe it's because I liked how much fun people were having in it, and as soon as they sang "Get Off," I gave it a pass. But a lot of people don't like it at all. Don't like it at all. So I don't know what you said about it. I'm looking for your chat, and I can't see it. Was it back here? Was it after the Ed Losey thing? Did it not show up? I'm looking and I don't see it. I do not. So I apologize for that. I'll keep looking though for it. Now I'm getting out of where it was. Duroc Media says, I got super tipsy yesterday during your show. Yay, I get to pay for it at work today. Keep them coming. Keep on rocking, Rob. Well, you were very nice. You did send me a very nice letter after that. So thank you. Thank you there. Thank you for that. Well, listen to everyone. Alexander, I'll look for that tip about Coming to America. I don't know where it went. But, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls across these 28 known galaxies, I want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody who supports this channel via super chats and tips. I really appreciate that. But I love when you send me letters too, free of charge. You can go to the website, theburnettwork.net. We linked our merch store. Mike keeps making new shirts. I love when I go to my own merch store. I'm like, oh, I got to buy that shirt. It's just, it's okay, which is great. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and the Richard. Joshua Levesque is here. Darren Seeley is here. Justin Toner's here. Robert Pariso's here. Bunyan Snipes here. Wow, everyone's here. Everybody's here. I want to thank you guys for all the work that you do and will do and are going to do. I don't know if Louise is here, but if Louise is here, hello, Louise. Thank you all for coming. And hopefully I'll be back. John was having computer problems today, so I wasn't on the John Campea show. We will be back, I think, tomorrow, I'm hoping. And all of that. And I'll be back, obviously, for Robservations tomorrow, hopefully talking about something other than the Snyder Cut, although I do like talking about the Snyder Cut. I find it interesting. It's a big event. By the way, did anyone see the trailer that dropped for Falcon and Winter Soldier today? The final trailer? That shit looks dope. I'm like, oh my God, I am so in. It looks really, really good. I fingers crossed. I want some Winter Soldier, esque Tom Clancy, buddy cop. I don't know. It looks so good. And I have to say, Anthony Mackie, I don't know if you guys have seen Synchronic. I'm turning into an Anthony Mackie acolyte. I'm really enjoying what he is dishing out. I think he's becoming a fan favorite of mine. Let me just say, I really, really like Anthony Mackie a lot. He looks, both of them, but he looks like he's having the time of his life in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So if they bring some of that yesterday, if they bring some of what I saw yesterday, today, if that sustains, I think the show is going to be really good. I can't believe we're getting the Snyder Cut and Falcon and Winter Soldier in the same day, in the same 24-hour period. I mean, because you can start watching Falcon and Winter Soldier at midnight on Thursday. Unbelievable. Very, very exciting. Very, very, very exciting. Can't wait. It's going to be great. Can't wait. And on that note, I guess I will say everyone you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that. So, yeah, we shall see.